As well as cycling for sheer enjoyment, for many of us, riding is a way of living a slightly greener life, reducing our carbon footprint by using pedal power instead of the combustion engine.
But is it actually? I mean, what happens if you throw electric transport into the mix? You see, this BMW i3 here behind me sees itself as the greenest mass-produced car currently on the market. And there are a few quite loud voices saying that this is better and greener even than cycling. So we thought we'd put things to the test. Currently we're in Bristol, which is about 20 kilometres or 14 miles away from our office in the beautiful city of Bath. Si's going to be the guinea pig that rides his bike, whilst I'm going to be in this BM.
But things aren't so bad for me, really. Now, in order to make this commute as efficient as possible, I need the right equipment. So I'm turning to my trusty Canyon Aeroad because aerodynamics is going to be absolutely key. I'm also using the new Zip 808 wheels, which, as well as being super aero, also have a revolutionary free hub that means I'll go faster even when coasting. And then finally as well, I'm trying to reduce my rolling resistance as much as possible. So I've got supposedly the fastest tyres available on the market. I've also got aero clothing, an aero lid, and I'm also going to try and stash my rucksack in Dan's car so I don't have to carry it.
You ready to roll then, mate? Last one to Bath buys the coffees, although it's not a race, remember?
It's not a race.
Well, this is rather pleasant, I have to say. I'm feeling quite cool driving this car around town, and quite warm, importantly as well. Far warmer than Si will be out riding his bike on a winter's day in the UK. One thing, however, I won't be today is fast, despite the fact that this car apparently can do 0 to 60 in just 7 seconds. You see, fast isn't eco, and that is the name of the game today. So what I'm going to be doing is driving conservatively, accelerating gently, and braking as little as I possibly can.
For those of you expecting to see me riding as fast as I possibly can now, I am going to have to disappoint you because, you see, riding fast isn't ecologically sound. And that is because energy consumption, and therefore carbon production, increases in proportion to the cube of speed, owing to wind resistance, obviously. So that means that I actually need to ride really, really slowly. As a bonus, I suppose I wouldn't need a shower when I got to work, even me. But if I'm honest, maybe we could just cut some kind of deal where I ride reasonably fast and then just freewheel the downhills, because I really don't want to get beaten by Dan.
Oh, here comes Si. See ya, Si. Bye-bye. Now, this car does have a motor that you can use in case of emergencies, but it is designed to almost entirely use the 125 kilowatt electric motor. And what that means, at least in the eyes of the law, is that we are not producing any CO2 whilst we drive this car. But that, I have to say, is nonsense, because the likelihood is the electricity we use to charge this car was produced using fossil fuels. So, for example, here in the UK, renewable energy sources account for just 14% of the total electricity produced for the national grid. So it's pretty hard at the moment to drive this without CO2, if not impossible. However, it is still a very efficient car. So this thing does 100 miles per gallon, even when using electricity produced from fossil fuels. And let's face it, the energy Si is currently using out on the road isn't just produced from thin air.
Now, I'm still reasonably fit at the moment, which makes me, relatively speaking, quite efficient from a mechanical perspective. But generally though, we humans, even on bikes, which make us some of the most efficient organisms on the planet, are actually not that efficient. Most of the energy we consume is released as heat, and only about 20 to 25% is actually going to be powering the bike. So it's fair to say then that a cyclist's diet is going to be absolutely fundamental to his or her carbon footprint. Now, Mike Berners-Lee, who's the author of Are Bananas Bad? The Carbon Footprint of Everything, has put estimates around this. A cyclist powered entirely by bananas would produce about 40 grams of CO2 per kilometre. Beef burger power would put that up to about 140 grams of CO2 per kilometre. And if I was fueled entirely by asparagus, air freighted into the country, I would be producing 2,000 grams of CO2 per kilometre. Now, my normal diet, not my asparagus diet, is a rather more reasonable 16 grams of CO2 per kilometre, according to ECF estimates, which makes me less efficient than the electric car if it was powered by renewable energy, but crucially, significantly more efficient than that electric car powered by the fossil fuels that power most of the UK national grid. So, that is good news.
I do really like this car, although there is a rather large caveat in all of this, and that is that to calculate the true carbon footprint of a car, you need to take into account, just like you would do with diet, the energy cost in the production of it. And that is massive. They all add up and mean that when this car rolls out of the factory floor, it's already at a deficit to other cars, let alone bikes. In fact, you will need to drive this thing around about half of its lifetime expectancy before you even draw even for something like an eco diesel car. So that's about 100,000 kilometres. So whilst this is still the greenest thing currently out there, the carbon cost is still worth about 42 grams of CO2 for every kilometre that you drive.
As much as I love bikes, I'm not naive enough to think that they don't require any energy to make. In fact, I appreciate that they take significant resources, carbon fibre supposedly being even more costly than metallic bikes from an energy perspective. Then when you add in the fact that over the lifespan of this bike, it's probably going to travel less kilometres than a car would over its lifespan, when you actually start calculating the CO2 produced per kilometre travelled, it starts to look a little bit more favourable towards cars. But let's face it, this bike weighs about 0.5% of the total of Dan's BMW. And then when you think about the fact that there's no battery or electronics, actually the materials used are far, far simpler. So while there are more ecological bikes out there perhaps, I would appreciate that maybe aerodynamics isn't quite as important as I first thought. The fact remains, this bike probably is worth about 5 grams of CO2 per kilometre, which is still 8 times more efficient than Dan's BMW.
Ah, glad to see you. I've been waiting for you. I will have a flat white, please.
All right, I just need to pop back to your car. My wallet's in my bag. I just left it on the back seat.
Do you know what, mate? I'm feeling quite generous today. I'll get these.
Oh, thanks, mate. That's kind of you.
Well, that was quite a lot of information. So, bicycle critics will point to the fact that the human body is not particularly efficient, that our diet and the extra calories we need for riding a bike will produce more CO2 than a car, and that there is also a carbon footprint in the production of a bike.
Yeah, but meanwhile, car critics will say that there's a huge cost involved in their production, that the sheer size of cars means that they're always going to be less efficient than bike riding, and that whether you're burning fossil fuels under the bonnet or in a power station, there's always going to be some greenhouse gases emitted when you're just trying to move a car forward.
So what then is the answer? Well, commuting by bike is far greener than commuting by car. In fact, we will produce 5 times less CO2 per kilometre if we ride a bike than if we drive a car in. And in fact, even if we take a bus, that's 2.5 times worse.
Yeah, and if you are worried about the carbon footprint of the production of your new bike, then with these figures in mind, if you ride it just 1,500 kilometres instead of driving your car, then you will have completely offset that carbon.
Yeah, and if carbon footprint is something which is really important to you, then the thing perhaps to focus on most is your diet. So vegans, this is where you get a high five.
How's your flat white? Yeah?
It's lovely. Have you seen Lasty, by the way?
No, I haven't actually.
I haven't seen him for a couple of days.
Well, Guys, today I win, and that's because the greenest way to commute to work is to not commute at all. Yeah, that's it. I've had a really, really nice day working from home, and the only carbon that I've burnt is when I've nipped to the kitchen to make myself another brew. Cheers. Now, if you've enjoyed this one and you'd like to find out how you can better commute to work by bike, just click right there and check out our commuting tips. To see our previous commuter challenge where Dan, Matt, Simon and myself go head to head, click down there. And finally, to subscribe to GCN, just click on me. And if you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and hit share.